the Nobel Peace Center and to the celebration of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. It was awarded to the World Food Programme, and I'm sitting in the middle of the Nobel Peace Prize exhibition here in Oslo. If this had been a normal year, it would have been bustling with people, and the laureate himself would have been coming here today to open the exhibition for us. But nothing is normal this year, and like everything else, the exhibition is also digital. But the good thing with that is that it's available for everyone to visit. You can look at it online from everywhere around the world. And still, we are happy and lucky enough to have with us the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, this year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate, from his office in Rome. Warmly welcome, David Beasley, and congratulations so much.
Thank you so much.
Yesterday, you received the Nobel Peace Prize medal in a very different ceremony. And it's been 2 months since you learned that your organization was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. How has these 2 months been for you?
Oh my goodness, it's been amazing. I mean, just receiving the announcement was just amazing. You know, I normally, if you hear about it, you might go get your suit on and go get in Rome and make sure you're in a formal setting to respond. But we were literally in the middle of Niger, negotiating access in the area where it had extremist groups so that we could get food in. So you're in a focused mindset. And then the next thing you know, someone's running in, Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm like, well, yeah, who won it? You know, I said, well, we did. And it was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Wow, you know, and it was amazing. And I'm so glad I was where I was, because it really showcased why I think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was granting this story to the World Food Program, because our women and men that put their lives on the line every single day. And here we were in a place of struggling because of climate extremes and conflict, fragile governance. And it's given us this extraordinary opportunity in these last 2 months to bring attention, awareness all over the world. Because when you turn on the TV in the last couple of years, it's either been Trump, 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 or Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. And we've got people struggling and dying. And now COVID has just compounded the situation. So it really is elevating the voice of awareness so that we can do what's necessary to literally save millions of lives around the world. So thank you, Nobel Peace Prize Committee. We need to give the Nobel Peace Prize to the Nobel Peace Prize Committee.
So actually you can echo what other Peace Prize laureates have said before you, that the prize puts a spotlight on the work and makes it more important and make people listen more closely to what you have to say.
Yes, exactly.
That's wonderful.
No, really, you can't believe how many people are calling and want to do shows, and we're like, how do we take advantage of this, really, to save lives? It's not like we're talking about building a better home. We're talking about really saving the lives and the stability of nations and avoiding mass migration. There's so much at stake right now, and COVID has just compounded it. So it's just been an extraordinary moment, giving us the voice that we need at a time in world history that really is at a crossroads.
And what about this issue, this connection between food and peace and war? How can you explain this connection and the importance of it?
You know, Kjersti, I think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was sending several messages. One, thank you for putting your lives at stake to bring peace and stability and save lives, but also recognizing the extraordinary work that the World Food Program does with the connection of peace, stability, starvation, hunger. And so they've seen the work that we've done out in the field in the most complex environments, whether it's Sudan or Yemen or Syria or the height of extremist groups, where we come in and use food as a weapon of peace, of creating stabilization. Because when we are not there, you have famine, you have destabilization, you have migration, and it's 1,000 times more expensive after the fact than if we come in with food and create a stable environment. And I don't mean just food in a calamity. It could be food for stability and sustainability as we rehabilitate landscapes so people can survive in the most hostile climate extreme environments, like in the Sahel, where you've got flash flood, you got droughts, and not just in conflict areas like a Sudan or South Sudan or Yemen or Syria. So it's a lot of things in a lot of places. And I think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was saying, and I believe this is extremely important, was thank you, but your most difficult work is just around the corner ahead of you. And we want the world to wake up to what we are about to face. So thank you.
Yeah, that's true. I, for myself, have learned a lot about the World Food Programme the last 2 months. The magnitude of your work. Actually, you assisted more than 100 million people last year in 80 countries. It must be a massive task to to work in very difficult circumstances with a very marginalized, vulnerable people.
You're right. And when I arrived here about not quite 4 years ago, there were 80 million people on the brink of starvation, not chronically hungry. That number is about 690 million today, but literally marching to the brink of starvation. They don't know where the next meal is. That was 80 million when I arrived. Well, as of the end of last year, it was 135 million. Why did it spike so fast? And the answer is simple, really, man-made conflict. On top of that, number 2 is climate extremes. But now, as you pointed out, the number of people that we're assisting, COVID has doubled that number from 135 to almost 200, give or take 270 million people. So you can imagine we're out there assisting about 100 million people on any given day, week, or month. My goal when I arrived was to put the World Food Program out of business because we'd ended hunger, sustainable programs were no longer needed. And it's heartbreaking to see that we're now going backwards after just dozens of years of so much success, but our work is cut out for. But we get it done in the most incredible environments, whether it's a climate extreme, whether it's a war zone, whether it's extremist groups, whether it's a cyclone, whatever it may be. We adjust, we're fluid, we're flexible, efficient, effective. And here's what's beautiful about the women and the men in the World Food Program. You know, people always question, oh, the UN's not efficient. Well, I beg to differ as to the World Food Program. Because the men and women that work here, they know for every 25 cents they save, that's a meal for a child. And so everybody has that incentive because we don't have enough money. And when we don't have enough money, we have to choose which children eat, which children don't eat.
It's terrible,
Oh, it's heartbreaking. And when
it's heartbreaking,
particularly when you got $400 trillion worth of wealth today, there shouldn't be a single child going to bed hungry, much less starving to death.
I so much agree with you. And we're so happy that this year's Nobel Peace Prize put the spotlight on your important work and the connection between food and peace that was also described by the Nobel Committee as a vicious circle. War leads to hunger, but hunger can also lead to instability and violence. And to explore this connection, we assigned or commissioned the very much acclaimed photographer Aïda Muluneh. She's born in Ethiopia, raised in Yemen, and has a background as a photojournalist for the Washington Post. Her works have been exhibited at MoMA, Smithsonian, and also here at the Nobel Peace Center. A warm welcome to you, Aïda Muluneh, joining us from Abidjan. Hi there. How are you today?
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Aïda, you have made a series of 10 photos illustrating 10 conflicts where food have been part of a war strategy. Can you please tell us a little bit about how you have worked with this series?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the World Food Program and also Mr. Beasley. I think it's well deserved in the current state of our world and our humanity. When this project actually, I received an email, and ironically enough, I've been watching closely what's been happening in Yemen, and I noticed that a lot of the media has sort of forgotten that there are people suffering in Yemen, and this is sort of a big question of our own humanity. So when I was asked to create the body of work, my first and primary focus was Yemen. And I created 10 pieces looking at 10 different countries in different times of history and also the contemporary issues that we're currently struggling with. So I decided that what was important for me was really to give my own artistic interpretation. As we all know in the mass media, I think the general public has gotten numb to the images that we see of famine, starvation. There's all these images that people are bombarded with and kind of makes everyone numb. So my work has always been to try to shed a different perspective on suffering and also on different challenges within society. And through that, this is how I was able to produce these 10 images with not a whole lot of time, but I'm very happy with how it turned out.
So are we. Let's have a little bit of a look at some of your photos. Aida, this piece is illustrating the Namibian desert. Can you tell us a little bit what happened here?
I mean, it's every assignment that I do or projects that I do, I engage in them because they offer such an educational process for me as well. I don't claim to know everything, but I was quite surprised because I was really unaware about the situation in Namibia and the genocide that happened of the Herero people. And when anyone can search for it online, when you look at the desert, the Namibi desert, it's quite beautiful and serene. But there's actually a dark history behind it. And so what I wanted to reflect was really, especially the emotional component. And what had happened was, within sort of the German tactics, they had pushed the Hereros into the desert and basically they starved to death out there. And I was trying for myself to imagine the emotional component of that, to watch other people around you dying, to know that there's no way for you to go back because you'll also be killed. And most people, even myself, I was really unaware that this was really the first contemporary genocide that we've had. And also, starvation was really a tool that was used as a form of, war. So I wanted to express this. And even when you look at the clothing, it's sort of a reinterpretation of the Namibian traditional clothing. And most of my work focuses around women because I believe women and children are usually at the forefront of, suffering that happens. So it was really a solemn way for me to express it. And there are many layers in each image. I know people are attracted to the color, but that's my way of bringing you into the image. But my ultimate goal is really to provoke questions and to have the audience look into all these historical things that have happened within our own humanity.
Thank you. Yes, this goes quite some time back. It was during the Germans' colony, wasn't it, in early...
I mean, the ironic thing was that this was basically the precursor to the Holocaust. So in a very, I don't know, it's a very sad situation, but basically, in Africa, we were the testing ground for what happened to the Jews in Germany. And if you really look at the historical content of it, some of the same officials that created this program of sort of trying to eradicate the Hereros were the same officials that, took part in setting up the concentration camps and what have you. So in a way, when we talk about war and hunger and so forth, this is something that's a global thing that connects us. But my main question is, we're in a contemporary world and we're still dealing with basic human rights such as food.
Thank you so much. In the exhibition, you can delve more into the details of all of the photos. We have to run further. The next picture we want to look at is Syria. One of the conflicts where hunger and food are used as a mean of power today is the ongoing war in Syria. Aida, what are you illustrating in this piece?
I mean, to me, I draw my inspiration from many different things. The first inspiration and something that I had seen actually in the media was a Syrian artist by the name of Tamam Azam, who drew on a large building that was bullet-ridden, Gustav Klemt's The Kiss. And I thought this was really fascinating of how artists in Syria were sort of, in a sense, tagging or doing these public art sort of to express their frustration. So the background, the yellow, is actually coming in inspiration from him. And there's one photo that I found quite fascinating, was a photo by Khalil Ashwai, who took a photo of a little girl selling bread on the streets, but all around her was like destruction and, basically chaos, fallen buildings and so forth. And what I try to imagine is really, this little girl who's really in this sort of surreal reality, having to sell bread to earn some kind of income for the home. And so to me, it was really, again, going back to the role of, the suffering of the mothers, the sisters, all the women's roles in all of this, and especially the new generation. So I wanted to create this piece sort of to make a representation of that. Even when you look at the bricks, it's just a representation of the sort of the collapse. And in a way, Syria being such a modern place, I always wanted to know just how people are living their day-to-day, to go from one reality completely into another. And also, something that started in a very specific way, now it's become just completely chaotic. So yeah, this is what I was trying to express in this piece.
Thank you. Beasley, World Food Programme is operating in Syria. How is it possible to do something in this country today?
Is that to me? Oh,
yeah.
When I was so caught up into the picture, and I was in the rubble, and I've been to Syria many times, but we assist about 4.5 million people there right now, and that goes up and down. And it's a war that's been now for 9 or 10 years, and I think the international community, especially the European community, regretted that it did not get in advance of the conflict and prevent the war and stabilize. Unfortunately, because they didn't. And let me tell you, we feed a Syrian in Syria for about 50 cents. If that same Syrian were in Berlin or Brussels, the humanitarian support package is about 50 to 100 euros per day. So it's at least 100, not 1,000 times more expensive. And the Syrian doesn't want to be there. When you feed 100 million people on any given day, week, and month like we do, we know what people are thinking. We survey them, we talk to them, and people don't want to leave their home area. In fact, there's about 6.5 million people internally displaced inside Syria. There's another 5-6 million that have fled for their lives because they couldn't get food. They didn't have peace and stability. And we find out for every 1% increase in hunger, there's a 2% increase in migration. And so now, with 9 to 10 years of war, the food security situation is getting worse. So I think what Aida is portraying here, I've seen the rubble on the ground. I've seen the children struggling because they're no longer able to get the food they need in schools. And the war just continues to drain the lives out of the Syrian people. We need peace and stability. If we get the money and the access, we can feed every single person in need there. But the war needs to come to an end. Yeah. And from the international perspective, number one, it's the right thing to do. And number two, you're going to pay for it 100-fold if we don't get in there early. And so as I hear people say, well, why should I help the people in Syria when I've got, needs in my schools in England or Germany? I'm like, well, number one, you should do it because it's right. And number two, it's in your national security interest. And if we can be there, we can avert famine, we can avert destabilization, and we can avert mass migration by necessity. And so this picture brings alive a reality that we see out there every single day.
Another catastrophe in human suffering is Yemen. A piece I know is very personal to you, Aida, because you grew up there. What are you telling us with this picture?
I mean, for me, my childhood memories of Yemen, what I remember of Sana'a, the buildings, the people, I have very specific memories of that time. And the one thing that I was trying to explore is really, in a sense, through this, catastrophe, what's happening is almost an eradication of traditions and cultures, structures. There's a lot of destruction that has happened. And even in my interview the other day, I was saying, I know my mother, her memory is far more mature than mine, but it's quite saddening to see the state of this country. And what I was really trying to express, and even the title of it saying, the road to glory, is I always find that, there's this African expression which I had written saying, this proverb that when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. So it's in a sense the suffering of the everyday person for decisions that have been made or political agendas that have been implemented that is not working out. So for me, it's I think Yemen needs to be back on the forefront because and I'm sure Mr. Beasley agrees on this, is that the situation is quite dire. And what I wanted to focus on was really the beauty of the culture that I remember, but also I think the great suffering that I imagine of, mothers having to, go hungry all day just to make sure that their children are able to eat. And I think often when we live in the comforts of the Western world, we cannot possibly relate to the suffering of, someone from across the planet. And this is the thing, is just imagine, when you have to make a decision, do you eat today? Or what you have, do you give to your child? And then to watch your child also dying, or whomever, I find this to be quite, I don't know, it provokes something very specific to me. And also knowing the culture, knowing the people, I mean, I can't imagine the level of suffering, and I can't even imagine what the staff of World Food Program must see on a daily basis and what they have to endure, because you almost have to shut down your emotions. And these are the things that run through my mind when I'm creating these pieces.
Beasley, Yemen, I believe, is your current largest operation in World Food Program, and something that you're very much concerned about. How is it emotional for your staff to work in a country like this?
It's heartbreaking. You have a nation of about 29 million people. We're now assisting about 13 million people. And out of that 13 million, we're only giving half rations to many because of the lack of access and the lack of monies that we need. We need $150 million per month right now just to avert famine. It is about as bad as it gets. This is the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. It is absolutely a catastrophe. We have famine knocking on the door as we speak. I have so many heartbreak stories. I was in a hospital months back in Yemen, and I asked the doctor, and this was a children's, not a hospital, but part of the hospital was for children. And I said, how many children do you have per day? And he said, about 50 come in per day. And I said, well, how many can you take? He said, well, we can only take about 20, 25. And I said, well, what do you do with the other 20, 25 you can't take? He said, we send them home to die. Mm-hmm. And as he was telling me this story, walking down the hall, and most children's hospitals are full of life. It might be crying, it might be screaming, it might be laughter, but here it was like a morgue. And I walked in this one room, and this little girl wrapped up in a blanket, and her little feet were sticking out. I'm a dad of 4 children. I thought, well, I go tickle the feet of the little girl and get a little smile on her face, and it was like tickling a ghost. It was just heartbreaking.
Yeah,
that's Yemen today.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we have to come to a close of this session. I could have sit here for hours talking with the two of you around the images, and I hope that we will be able to meet in June, or when hopefully the things have changed and you can come to Oslo to give your lecture. And then perhaps also I hope, Aida, that you will be able to be here for the exhibition, so that we can explore more. This has been very, very interesting, and thank you so much for giving your thoughts and reflections around the situations and around the pieces. For me, these images really creates curiosity around situations, and I hope that will also be the case for our audience, so that they will be willing to go deeper into the situation and learn more and be more engaged. And we, for our sake, we will do our utmost to put our spotlight on the situation and the work of World Food Program in the coming months. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. And in a little while, we will have a new panel to discuss further around the governments and the civil society and the public sector, the private sector's role in SDG number 2, combating hunger. So stay tuned. But first we will have a look at this little piece. Thank you.
8 out of 10 of the world's main food crises are partly driven by conflict and violence. The 2020 Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the United Nations World Food Programme is a recognition of the important link between conflict and hunger and the critical role that food assistance plays in supporting the first step towards peace and stability. By improving food security, we can prevent hunger and help build more stable communities. From supporting homegrown school meal programs to providing food to people in exchange for work on community assets like roads or dams, the World Food Programme uses food to promote stability, to help save lives during conflict, to help rebuild after conflict, and overall, to help build peace. Without peace, we cannot end world hunger.
Welcome back to this second segment of our celebration of this year's Nobel Peace Prize to the World Food Programme. And with me now I have Sethov, Executive Vice President in Hydro. Welcome. And from his office, Bård Vegar Solhjell, the Executive Director of Norad, Norwegian Development Aid Agency, and also Svein Holsether, the CEO of Yara. I guess we could have discussed at length what we just have heard, the pictures, the situation in these countries. We were just talking about it while we were, that it's quite taking.
It really made an impression, yes. Wonderful.
Make you reflect on how people live in these situations more than what we usually hear, perhaps. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about the SDG 2, Zero Hunger by 2030. And as we heard from Mr. Beasley, Bård Vegar, he was talking about how lack of attention makes it more difficult today to work and to deal with the situation. We heard that the number of hungry people are increasing, and we know that the COVID-19 has made us very much aware of our own problems, focusing and using lots of funds for dealing with the problems here in Norway and all over the world. We are kind of having new problems. So what is the situation as you see it? Will this also affect our willingness and ability to fund World Food Programme and other important issues like this?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature in many ways, but right now, facts on the ground are that the picture is quite bleak. You know, we've seen a doubling of acute hunger, like Mr. Beasley and the World Food Programme has documented. That comes on top, of course, the malnutrition and the issues of food security we already had. We've also been seeing, after a generation of progress, really, we've been seeing kind of a backlash now and a rise in extreme poverty. And that extreme poverty is people living for less than $2 every day. Just imagine how little you can buy for $2 in your country. So we are seeing sort of a backlash. And that leaves us, unfortunately, a bit off track to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals and more specifically goal number 2. So I find it quite importantly these days to appeal to the public sector, of course, but also to the private sector, that we have to remember that we're part of the same global health crisis now. We're also part of the same global economy and the same global goals. We're seeing a downward tendency both in private sector investments, quite a steep downward tendency in poor countries. Aid could go down because many countries have pegged their aid to the national economy. But I think that we have to, especially maybe when we start getting a vaccine in countries like Norway, when the economy starts recovering, we have to remember that for many poor countries, they have no oil fund, no social safety nets, and we have to remember not to leave them behind and step up the game for the Sustainable Development Goals and for development cooperation with them.
Thank you. It's a fact, isn't it, that we've been very self-aware we've been focusing on the election in the US, like he said, and the Brexit, and then also, I mean, media in Norway and all over the world are full of the COVID. So, of course, broadening the picture and broadening our awareness is quite important for the whole society, the whole world in the months to come. Svein Tore Holsether, you are the CEO of Yara, and you are into food and agriculture products. And Yara, you have established a close collaboration with the World Food Programme and Norad. Can you tell us a little bit why you see that you have a responsibility to step up, and how you take on this responsibility? What do you actually do with it?
Well, first of all, congratulations to David Beasley and the World Food Programme. They are out there on the front lines every day battling hunger. So it's a very deserved prize and something that is very close to heart for us in Yara. In fact, our very existence as a company is to increase food security. 115 years ago, when Europe was at the brink of famine, and our founders came up with a solution to that through fertilizer. We worked together with the World Food Programme for a number of years, and in fact, I've known David Beasley for quite some time as well. And when I saw him back in April addressing the UN Security Council, you know, how intense he was and the urgency that he conveyed. So I picked up the phone and I called David and asked him, what can we do? And he was really clear. You need to get your fertilizer out to the smallholder farmers. And I told him that, okay, we'll donate fertilizer, but let's do this together. You need to help us on the ground. And we also got the Norwegian government on board. And as a result of that, we were able to get 40,000 tons of fertilizer out to 250,000 smallholder farmers in Africa. And the extra yield from that is enough food to provide food for 1 million people for a year. And also with Norad, we've been working together for more than 15 years now in Tanzania and in Mozambique to create the food production corridors. So for us, this is really close to heart, and indeed our very mission or the purpose of why we exist as a company is to responsibly feed the world and protect the planet.
Thank you. Inger, we know that hunger is closely connected with security and stability in societies. How does Hydro around the world, because you're operating in many countries, how do you see your role in societies where you operate?
Thank you very much, Kjersti, for that question, and thank you very much for having me here, and also congratulations to a very, very worthy Peace Prize winner. And to answer that question, Kjersti, I also need to go back in history a little bit, and really the root of our companies, both Svein Tore's company and my own company, is really the same, and it started back in 1905. And that was the time when some bold souls, Norwegian souls, actually found a way to develop the natural resources and the power assets of Norway, the waterfalls, and actually produce products that the world at the time needed to actually combat famine at the time. And what they realized is that they needed people, they needed workers to come to the area. And the workers came to the area of the valleys in southern Norway. The problem was they came there and there was no livelihood. There was no infrastructure, there was no housing, no food, no way to provide for a good life, which they all seeked at the time. So a lot of people who came, they actually left again, not because there weren't jobs, there were lots of things to do, but there was no viability of the local societies. So the founders of Hydro and of Yara actually realized something that is really key to what we're doing still today. They realized that businesses cannot succeed in societies that fail. So that was really a key learning that they learned very early on. So they built infrastructure, they built a society, they actually even built a cable car going up to the mountains, to the top of the mountains, to make sure that the workers actually saw the sun, because they realized that was important for their well-being. And when they did that, they didn't do it alone and just found a way to do it. They actually invited in the workers and even their families and local communities and sat down and thought and discussed, how do we do this together? And I think that's the key. How do we do this together to enable and empower the local communities to themselves promote and develop their own viability of their own local society. So now we see also the pride and the ownership among those local communities that still exist today. And we have now, 115 years later, that purpose still lives very much in us, to contribute to a viable society. So when we're now around the world in 40 different countries, also in very weak societies, 35,000 people we have, among them in Brazil, in northern Brazil, very weak society with a lot of lack of infrastructure, high teenage pregnancy rates, high illiteracy rate, and really high also crime rates. We are trying to do the same thing by establishing arenas for people to sit down and talk. Another great worthy Nobel Peace Prize winner, Nelson Mandela, who said that the best weapon is sit down and talk. So we're really living by that as well. And that's what we're trying to do now with a very concrete initiative called the Barca Arena Sustainable Initiative, where we actually invite in people, we sit down, and we are really dependent on that public-private partnerships and really partnering up with the local communities to really create that ownership and engagement locally. It's all about local know-how and local ownership. I do think that we're better at that today than we have been, and actually seeing the profitability and sustainability go hand in hand. And I think that businesses in general are concerned with that, and they're stepping up to that reality. So I would like to throw the ball back to you, Svein Tore, and ask if you agree with me that businesses are more and more stepping up to that task.
Yes, absolutely. Going back to March, when the pandemic hit with full force, I was faced with probably the biggest, or for sure the biggest challenge in my professional career, because in Yara we know that, the importance of our product. If we don't get the fertilizer out to the farmers for the season, the yields will drop by 50%. So then a health pandemic very quickly can turn into a hunger pandemic. And how do we deal with that? And for sure, you can't centrally control something like that when it hits as massive as this, with all the constraints that were introduced. So what we did was that we said, okay, we have three priorities now. Number one, health and safety of our employees and contractors. Two, local governments the spread of this virus. And number three, make sure we get the product out to the farmers and do what you need to do in order to get that done. And it's a pretty scary situation to be in because of the impact it could potentially have if we didn't get our product out there. So there was some uncomfortable days, and then the numbers started to come in, and we had production record in our plants in north of Italy. I don't think we ever moved as much product in Spain, Italy, and France in the month of April than what we did this year. And that's not because it was easy, but because the organization stepped up. And I think this is very much related to being a purpose-driven companies, that our employees know the importance, and it's something really meaningful to work with in a very challenging situation. So to get that momentum was really heartwarming to see, and it confirms how important it is to link what you do as a company to the needs of society, and we will not be successful unless society is successful as well, and then profits will be a result of that.
Thank you. Sounds like our friends from the business community are stepping up, Bård Vegar. When the UN adopted the sustainability goals in 2015, I think that was the first time really that business was seen as a important sector to help achieve the goals. It was a big rally around it, and it has been a lot of businesses kind of talking a lot about the sustainability goals. Still, we have quite some way to go. What is your assessment around this situation? Does it help? Do they really step up, or is it more lip service in your perspective?
No, I couldn't agree more. Many are doing a lot, but we have a way to go. Governments need to do more, companies need to do more, but I would also add that good partnerships is maybe key to doing even more. And one example, that this morning the Norwegian Minister of International Development, Dag Inge Ulstein, announced that Norway will grant 150 million Norwegian kroner to something called Farm to Market Alliance. That's the World Food Program, the Nobel Peace Laureates cooperation with the private sector, for instance Yara, but also many others, mobilizing to do something about the food systems and the logistics that has to be created to actually get food to the market. And in Norad, we are now working systematically to look for good ways of doing partnerships with the private sector that can mobilize more capital to the Sustainable Development Goals. And that in two ways, really. The first way is looking for ways in how quite small grants from the public sector can help make really or much bigger private sector investments. That could be through guarantees or to look for risk covering, things that can actually get the private sector to invest a lot more in key solutions. The other way is more indirect. But remember that for the private sector to invest, especially in low-income countries, they need to see that there's an educated workforce, good institutions, and so on. So when Norway is investing a lot in education, and especially in girls' education, that's also an investment in a future workforce. And we in Norad, we are working through the Knowledge Bank to strengthen institution in low-income countries. We're also working to strengthen the climate for investments. And then, of course, I think also this has to do with the way we think, because I know the history and the background of Yara and Hydro quite well, actually, because I grew up close to an area where Hydro was a dominating company. And I know the role they played, the social responsibility they had locally. But I think modern day companies have to think in the same way as Hydro and Yara does, but also globally. Because we are so interconnected, and taking that social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and taking it out of the concrete area where you work in, and actually thinking about it in a global way is also key to even more private sector engagement.
Interesting. So what would you say are the obstacles to kind of really get even more effect out of public-private partnerships and achieving the SDGs in terms of this collaboration?
Well, I think that we in the public sector have a way to go, to be honest about that. We have to look for instruments and tools in our toolbox that can work with the thinking of the private sector and the needs of the private sector. And of course, I don't mean subsidies, but I mean ways that we can spend quite small sums of money in ways that can promote or help the private sector investments actually being fulfilled. In the renewable energy field, we've had some success with that. In quite small grants, make it possible for a huge investment in a poor country to actually come through. But I think also we have to talk more to pick up on Inger's point. The private sector and the public sector from time to time, we come from different spheres. We have to be better at finding ways of working together, understanding each other better, and building partnerships based on that.
May I pick up on that, Kjersti?
Yes.
That's a great challenge, and I would like to thank you for that, Bård Vegar. And as you know, we are very much taking this purpose with us when we go out in the world. But I have to say that we do that also with humbleness and with respect for the fact that we need to localize the way we work. And I've gone to Brazil a lot for the past 10 years, and I've fallen in love with Brazilians. You know, they're the warmest, kindest, most wonderful people. I think that we here in the north, guys, we have a lot to learn in the cold north of the warm Brazilian culture. But what is also very different is that we are a society very much built on trust. We're built on trust, and we are used to a society where people trust each other, and it's based on dialogue and trust. So when coming to Brazil, when you know that there is a lack of trust, you know, you don't have that kind of trust to authorities, to the infrastructure, to the system, to your neighbors, to your politicians, to corporations, you have to adapt to that. And some might call it arrogance sometimes when we come in and do things our way. You might say we're naive. I think that sometimes it's a sort of a lack of respect for the local context, you know, and we should, as corporation, be really good at listening and really adapt to that local context. And I have to say that in Hydro, we've learned the hard way, because we had a very difficult situation a couple of years ago in Brazil, where we had faced a lot of criticism, and we had very few allies in local communities and very few friends, because we had done too little, too late, and we had failed to really adapt to that local context. And I think that we've learned from that, and now, and that was what we based this new initiative on, called the Sustainable Barca initiatives, where we're now seeing a lot more. We're seeing that by inviting people in, by inviting partners, by sitting down and talking together and creating that common ground and that trust, we can do a lot together. So we have managed now, we think, to really lower the degree of violence, or at least contribute the way we can to lower the degree of the crime rate and the violence and really the conflict level, so that we can actually create that local ownership, help local farmers, create the know-how, you know, transfer the know-how locally, and enable them to create their own businesses, and also to help out to create marketplaces so that the local farmers actually can contribute to the local competence and companies, so that they take ownership to their own viability of their own communities.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Svein Tore, I guess you also can echo the importance of working with societies where you operate. COVID came at a very difficult point of time in terms of hunger in the world. But it has, for many of us, spearheaded innovation and creativity and doing things in different ways. Can you tell us a little bit how the COVID situation has been important for you and how you have been able to also find something positive in this situation and drive your innovation?
Sure, reflecting on what it looked like at the beginning of the year with the pandemic, I first thought that everything long-term and issues related to sustainability would be put on hold to fight the pandemic. But now we're in December. What I've seen is that it's been the opposite, really accelerating the sustainable development goals and cooperation. I think what we really realize now is how weak the global supply chains really are. Well, it's been pretty much solved in many parts of the Western world, but as we heard from David, there are many people that are still struggling, and it's getting worse for many. And in that regard, what Bård Vegar said on the announcement from the Norwegian government to supply or to support the farm-to-market lines with 150 million Norwegian kroner, that's fantastic news, because it's about building business models. It, of course, doing foreign aid and support those in desperate need, but it's also about creating lasting business models. And that's where the farm-to-market lines comes in to create full value chains, linking smallholder farmers to a market. And I think it's a great example of public-private collaboration. And also reflecting within our own company, I mentioned getting products out to 250,000 smallholder farmers in order to make sure that we would be able to track all the way from factory here in Norway to a bag getting to a smallholder farmer in Africa. We developed a digital platform to communicate with the farmers, and it was so great to see our digital team. They worked day and night to build this almost from scratch, and we hope to get the 250,000 farmers on board. Well, we have 2 million now, so it's really exponential growth, and through that channel we're able to convey agronomic advice, weather, and so on to help the farmers to become more sustainable and to have a stronger business model. So I think we were leaving in 2020 with definitely reflecting on this being an extremely difficult year for so many, but also a year where SDG number 17, partnerships for the goals, has been demonstrated, and hopefully we'll learn from this and accelerate this into the next years as well, and finding ways where we can work together across value chains to solve these challenges.
As we have to wrap up this session as well, I'm left with a mixed feeling of kind of the magnitude of the problem that we heard from David Beasley, and that we know about the situation for so many people in this world. 690 million people are hungry every day, which is quite a task for the global community to tackle. And also listening to you this morning, talking about what you actually are doing and stepping up in order to help solve these issues and driving the world in a better way and a better path. Bård Vegar, what would you like to see next year happening that really would drive things forward and get the figures going down in terms of how many people that are starving in the world? What would you be dreaming about for us to see when we meet in October or September, October, and see, well, this has been a year where we have been focusing on the World Food Programme, and here we are now.
Well, let me first echo Inger and Svein on welcoming more partnerships. I think that's key. Right now in Norad, we are working with developing strategic partnerships. We've had some. There's a new round now. We will go into strategic partnerships with several Norwegian companies and NGOs, possibly international, to work alongside each other. But maybe you asked about dreaming. Maybe I'll leave one challenge to us, because you said, Kjersti, earlier that we are maybe thinking a bit more about ourselves for a period now, and that could be true. But at the same time, what we have been through the last year, maybe have we never seen a better example in the history of mankind of how interconnected we are. Imagine something that probably started on a so-called wet market in Wuhan, a city in China that very few people have heard about. 3 months later, it was the event that affected people the most everywhere in the world. And we know also that the solution, finding a solution, we are totally interconnected. We have put the research facilities and started research around the world. We will need to vaccinate people in most of the world to get the immunity that's needed. And I think that is something I would leave behind, that many of the challenges we have now are truly global. The climate challenge and the nature challenge, global health, but of course also food systems and the food challenge. And food is so interconnected with poverty, hunger, but also with the climate. So it's time now, I think, for many of us to think more globally and to actually understand that to invest in ourselves, we have to invest in the societies, not only around us, but also the societies that are quite far away from us.
I think that was a very nice closing of this morning's seminar. And thank you so much to Bård Vegar Solhjell, to Stein Tore Holsether, and to you, Inger Sethov, and also to David Beasley and Aïda Muluneh for joining us this morning. We at the Nobel Peace Center, we will have a celebration around the Nobel Peace Prize to the World Food Programme throughout next year until the next laureate will be announced. So we will have plenty of opportunities to discuss and explore this issue in the coming months. And we really do look forward to putting the spotlight on this very, very important issue for humanity and for human rights, for societies, for peace and security in the world. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you to the audience that has been watching, and I wish you a nice day and a good weekend. And I think we've all got something to think about, and to think that we are all part of the global society. I think you really pointed out very well, Bård Vegar, how interconnected we are. I talk with friends all over the world and they say, well, we sit in our home office and we all have the same experience these days, don't we? Much more than we ever had. So this, I agree with you, this gives us also an opportunity. We can talk around the globe in seminars like this, and it gives us a lot of possibilities also in solving the issues and problems that we have. So thank you so much, and be safe, take care, and keep distance with your binders on. So
Thank you.
Goodbye for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.